third reality. There was a boy, there was a girl. Now there's a third reality, which is a couple. And so the couple, is a singular word, a couple, one couple. And so there's a sense in which the couple is a new and third reality. Now, if you consider relationships, if the two people literally lose their individual identity, this is called codependence, which is a problem. Codependence, where the people lose their sense of individual integrity, lose their sense of individuality, and really have no true identity outside their dependence on the other person. That's going too far in terms of oneness. And if, on the other hand, this couple, they don't really talk to each other that much, and they don't agree, they get to a point where they don't agree on very many things, except they agree to disagree on everything. But they don't want to pay their own rent, so they stay together or something. Obviously, if the people are too separate, if there's no real sense of oneness between these people, then it's also not a healthy relationship. And so if you consider, even psychologically, what a healthy relationship is, it's a combination of oneness and difference, individuality. And also the same is true for normal, sane cognition. For example, in this room right now, in order for you to be a sane human being, conscious of what's going on here, you have to be able to perform two functions, which in Sanskrit are called vyasa and samasa. Asa means to place, and so vyasa means to place apart, and samasa means to place together. Vyasa, by the way, is actually a title of Dvaipayana. The person's name is actually Dvaipayana, and he's called Vyasa. That's actually his title, the editor, or the divider. So, anyway, in this room right now, you have to be able to perceive the different individual objects, such as the chandeliers, the fans, the walls, the floor. If you can't tell the difference between the floor and the wall, or between the person next to you and the clock, you need help. So you have to be able to, we distinguish between the different parts of our own body. When we sing, the songs we sing here, there are different words. The words have different sounds in them. And so on. There are melodies. Melodies, of course, are pleasing, good melodies are pleasing ratios between sounds, and different tones. So, in order to be a sane human being, you have to be able to perform this function. You have to be able to distinguish between yourself and others, different parts of your own body, the different sounds of a word, different grammatical relationships between words, up and down, sideways, what's the door, what's the window. You have to be able to distinguish all these things. At the same time, you have to be able to put it all back together into one coherent experience. Namely, we're sitting here doing a class. And that is a single, integrated experience. It's one thing. And yet there's so many different components. So if you think about one and different, this is the, ultimately, this is the ontology of our movement. Ontology means philosophy of existence, the nature of existence. If you look at Indian intellectual history, which focused on the interpretation of sacred texts, such as the Jnanakanda portion of the Vedas, the Upanishads, Indian intellectual history, there were basically 6 different Vedic philosophies, and which are called Vedic philosophies. And then there were philosophies outside the Vedic culture, the philosophies that rejected the Vedas, such as Buddhism and Jainism. Never mind those for now. That's another interesting thing. But in terms of people who remain faithful to the original culture and the original wisdom of that culture and trying to understand the Vedas, there were 6 different approaches. Among those 6, the big winner ultimately was Vedanta. Vedanta was one of those 6, and ultimately it really predominated, and the other ones became sort of footnotes. And if you look at Vedanta, the word Vedanta we associate with the Vedanta Sutras, also called the Brahma Sutras. Ultimately, Vedanta is the apparatus, in other words, the literature which formed the foundation of the attempt to philosophically understand the absolute truth. There were three literatures that together were considered to be Vedanta. One is the Brahma Sutras, which we also call the Vedanta Sutras. Also the Upanishads and the Bhagavad Gita. So ultimately the Brahma Sutras were an explanation of the Upanishads. The Upanishads are called Shruti Prasthana, or a point of departure from Shruti, from the original Vedic literature. The Brahma Sutras were called Nyaya Prasthana. In other words, Prasthana means point of departure, punto de partida, and from logic, because it's a logical interpretation of the Upanishads, and Bhagavad Gita was called Smriti Prasthana, but ultimately spoken by God himself, it's the most important book. So anyway, if you look at the great Vedanta tradition, ultimately, although they discussed epistemology, how do you know, how do you get valid knowledge, ultimately, the real battleground, the real issue that occupied most of the attention of the great philosophers in Indian history was ontology, which is the nature of existence. What are the fundamental real things in the world? And ultimately, there was some agreement that God is a real thing, and that souls really exist, and also that the world somehow exists. And then the question was, how do these things exist? What is the relationship? Is one just an illusory appearance of the other? In other words, are individual souls simply the illusory appearance of one absolute truth? Or are individual souls fundamentally real? What about nature? Is nature simply an illusion? Or is it also real? And if so, how is it real? So anyway, in discussing these things, ultimately I would say the obvious truth of the matter is that God and souls and nature are simultaneously one and different. This is the teaching of Lord Chaitanya. It was actually also the teaching of many classical philosophers in Greco-Roman civilization, and it was also the teaching of other Vedantists, actually before Lord Chaitanya. But Lord Chaitanya confirmed this is actually the proper understanding, that we as individual souls are one with God, and at the same time, we are different. It's just like any healthy relationship. Two people, let's say who have a loving relationship, are one, but they're also different. It's exactly like the nature of sane cognition. In order for you to be sanely conscious of what's going on here, you have to see both the differences between people and directions and words, and you also have to put it all together into a single, coherent, integrated experience. It's just someone speaking in the temple. And so one and different is not simply an intellectual interpretation of some old Sanskrit literatures. It's the nature of reality itself. It is actually the nature of all reality. For example, if you study ancient Greek philosophy, one of the issues that really got to these people, the ancient Greeks, was the relationship between the individual and the category. Anyway, I won't go into all of Plato and Aristotle, but they really stayed up late at night worrying about this. So to give a typical example that would have kept Plato and Aristotle up at night, consider horses. There's a category horse. So if you say the horse is a noble, the horse is a handsome creature. So when you say the horse, the category, you don't mean any particular horse, but just horses. And so, in other words, there's a sense in which every horse belongs to the category of horse. And yet there's a sense in which every horse is a unique individual horse. The oneness is real, and the uniqueness is real. To say that this particular horse is unique is a true statement. To say that this unique horse